Welcome to Positive Philter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career, with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey, Positive Philter listeners, back again. Well, we're in the future and in the past. It's kind of like a time warp. I'm recording this with my brother-in-law right now in real time. What's this, May? But this will be the first episode of season 3, which you're really excited to start off and kick off. But this is a long time coming, this episode. My brother-in-law and I have tried to link on being on the podcast, thinking about subjects that we wanted to discuss. And then we're like, you know what, let's throw it back to the old episodes for the listeners. So if you are a loyal listener of the podcast, you would have heard really, really early, I think it's my 11th episode, back about 2 years ago, which is crazy. I've been podcasting. I spoke to my sister-in-law about being a transplant of New York. And I was like, you know what, why don't I talk to someone that actually grew up in New York and his perspective. So I'm very fortunate to have on the podcast my brother-in-law, Nick Masson. Now, Nick, for the listeners, give them a little bit of a intro about your background, who you are, and then we'll just go right into it about, the Big Apple.
Yeah, sure. Nick Masson. I'm Phil's brother-in-law. We both married two very, very lovely Fox Kirsch women. Me, Katie, and Maggie. Born and raised in New York City, borough of Queens, School of Hard Knocks. Yeah.
So going back, this episode, Katie met you in the theater world, but she had been living in New York before, meeting you, but then marrying you solidified that she is a New Yorker now, right? But you were born and raised in New York. But we all know that there's many boroughs to New York, and people claim and rep different boroughs. Tell the listeners what borough you rep.
I rep Queens, man. I rep Queens, the Q borough, the School of Hard Knocks.
So Q was it like Nas? Was it? Isn't he? Is it Nas from? So,
man, that's not too far from us.
Yeah. So, for people, it's super naive to how big and how encompassing New York is. Can you give us a personal, just kind of your perception? What are the differences between the boroughs, and and then maybe the uniqueness of Queens, where you are from?
Sure. I mean, growing up, or even years ago, or maybe even before I got into real estate, which is what I do now aside from theater, people used to always call Manhattan the city. And then there was the other boroughs. There's the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and then we don't really talk about Staten Island. I think most of us consider Miami more of a borough than Staten Island, but since I've been out to Staten Island a bunch recently for business, we'll include it. Now, but when you think of the city, you think of Manhattan. That's where energy was. That's where the theater was, the entertainment. The Knicks play in Manhattan. The Rangers play in Manhattan. A lot of the transportation in the city, Penn Station, Grand Central, Broadway, and so on, Empire State Building, all of that. The boroughs, people sometimes misconstrue and think of them as a suburb. I now fully consider them a part of, and I have had a tendency to correct people when they just say, "Oh, the city of Manhattan." I'm like, no. There are 5 boroughs in the city of New York.
Yeah, and they're all New York, right?
So it's all New York, and in terms of size. So if you were to, I actually looked at this the other day for work because I was curious population-wise. So if you were to break Brooklyn off from New York City, I think it'd be like 3rd or 4th largest city in the country.
Wow. Okay, by itself. Okay. Wow.
itself. There's like 2.4 million people that live in Brooklyn. If you broke off Queens,
Wow.
like the fourth or something like that, because we've got like 2.2, 2.3 here. Manhattan only has like 1.8. The Bronx is 1.6, and Staten Island is like sub 500,000.
Okay, wow. That's interesting. Like, that's a lot of people in a, I don't know, square footage, but that's a lot of people.
It is a lot of people in a very consolidated area, which is also why it's obviously we talked about the hybrid of a fast forward, future past.
Yeah.
Of why this city is so impacted the way it has been over the course of the coronavirus pandemic.
Right. Right. So with that being said, like how, maybe how intense and how many people are there, but at the same time, just the infrastructure is there. What do you see as the future of New York? Like, do you see more people moving out, or do you think with just technology, people are going to build up, and just continue to move? Or maybe just in your you're living there and growing up there. Do you think more and more people are going to move there, or do you think more people are going to move out, like and populate out?
I'd say we've actually kind of seen a decline in the city in terms of population over the last few years. Maybe like 10 or so years ago, back in the day, everybody wanted to live in Manhattan. You wanted to live there, work there, breathe there, play there. And then all of a sudden there was a boom, let's call it mid 2000s, the aughts, up until 2010, if you will, that all of a sudden it was like, wait a minute, I don't want to live in Manhattan anymore because there's too many damn people, too many darn tourists. No offense to anybody.
Sure.
We appreciate you. We love you. The buildings are big and huge, and you don't have to stop in the middle of the sidewalk just to stare at them.
Yeah.
No offense, but so then it turned into, people were moving to parts of Brooklyn, parts of Queens that were along like the East River. Alternatively, people were also moving on the other side of the Hudson River to parts of Jersey, Jersey City, Hoboken, Weehawken, all of that stuff. Because now I want to be close proximity, very, very fast transit-wise, my commute to work. But now I want to see it. Like, I want to see the lights lit up at night, not be a part of it.
Yeah, you want to have a view of the city, but not to be in it. And then you also because as we discussed, I think one of the things that preconceived notion, I don't feel like I'm a Southerner or a country boy, but I had this preconceived notion of, as you said, like the city of New York is only Manhattan. And then when I met you and then started spending more time, I realized that Queens was something I really liked because it was like a neighborhood, and I realized that more and more as I've come to visit you guys, that it has a different feel where you can get the benefits of the city life of New York and everything that's going on. But then if you want to get a little bit more space, you move out, and out as in the boroughs, which is a pretty, crazy thing. Cause I'm pretty sure you've gotten that before when you've brought friends from other places all over the world to New York. They had this preconceived notion of, what they see as only Times Square. You know what I'm saying? Like they think New York is Times Square and that's it, but they don't realize it's so different.
When you break apart and look at all the other boroughs, a lot of the culture, that Brooklyn has, the whole forget about it. And you look at the character John Travolta played in Saturday Night Fever.
Yeah.
You look at, Notorious B.I.G. and everything, Spike Lee. That's what you think a lot of the flavor of like Brooklyn. And then you also have now the Nets and the Barclays Center and a lot of hip hop culture, but a lot also in Queens, Jamaica, Queens. That was like Run DMC. Was it LL Cool J from Hollis. But then what's also cool about Queens is there's the part of Queens which is called Jackson Heights. It is the most ethnically diverse part of the city with the most variety of cuisine and foods and over 83 languages spoken.
Wow. It's like the UN right there.
Basically.
So was that, okay, so where did you grow up? And then what was your experience like growing up in Queens? Was it very diverse, similar to that? Or,
No, definitely very diverse and very, I grew up in Forest Hills. Forest Hills is a nice part of Queens. Depending on where in Forest Hills you were, it's like middle class to middle class affluent. There's a part called the Gardens, which I did not grow up in, but always fantasized. I had friends in elementary school that had houses there. I went to school from 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. When I changed from private school to public school, that lived in the Gardens, and like there was kind of like the running joke. There was like Beverly Hills 90210 to kind of like date myself now. And then they always said, there's Forest Hills 11375.
It was like, oh, okay, wow, that was like the rich, the well-off kids.
Yeah, and like Forest Hills is also like where the original area where they played the U.S. Open, the West Side Tennis Club, before it moved to Fresh Meadows, Arthur Ashe Stadium, Louis Armstrong, and like the compound grounds, which are now right next to Citi Field, not too far from us. It was different. I was riding subways at an early age, with friends, not necessarily by myself, riding, public transportation, buses, had certain liberties and freedoms. I mean, it's also a completely different time than it is now. Looking back on the fact that, I don't know, in high school, I'd be hanging out in the West Village, the East Village, after getting out of doing like theater on East 4th Street and 2nd Avenue, and staying out to like 1, 2 in the morning and getting in a cab with my friends and whatever. I just like, I think about Jack and my son and other kids, and I'm like, I would never let that happen.
Yeah, and like we're dating ourselves too. I mean, you probably had the old Nokia box phone that you had a cell phone, but we didn't have like crazy communication to be out roaming the streets. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, back in the day, I had a beeper. This is the most ridiculous option. You get a beep, which eventually you learned how to do all the code with numbers and send messages. But regardless, like it's like if your mom wanted you, she beeped you, and then you'd have to have change in your pocket and go find a payphone.
Yeah.
Or if you were at a friend's house, then you could pick up the phone and call and say what's up and whatnot. And by the time I was going to college, technology was different. There was Nokia, Motorola, StarTech, all that crap.
But it was like a lot of freedom. I mean, you was at an early age growing up, you just said it, you were using public transit, and it was a lot more freedom. But you even speaking as from a father's point of view, like you go in a time machine, you wouldn't be comfortable with your son doing as much in the same, and I say in the same city, or why not?
Just because times are different. People are different. Technology is different. What somebody, they're the kind of predators that are out in the world. I mean, they were then at the same time, but they weren't as savvy as they are now. You know what I mean? So like if I was 12, 13 years old walking on the street and some like weirdo walked up to me and my friends, we kind of look at each other and like laugh them off. Nowadays, some weirdo could come up to you and know everything about you.
Yeah, the information.
And like, conversation is if like they're, one of my friends or one of Katie's friends or something crazy like that. And it's just the world is evolved to an anomaly that I don't quite understand.
So you would say, and so that just being more cautious, but I mean, still relatively, where you grew up is still relatively safe in Queens. But it was just like a different time. I kind of agree too. I think we had a lot more. It's almost like we're dating ourselves because we're in a new generation now where I'm thinking about the things I did in high school. I don't know if I'd be as comfortable with my children doing the same, or just in general, way more access to. On the flip side, like our kids will have a lot more access to things that we never had access to. Like maybe we would be a little bit more free with them going around, because I can call them and say, you better answer your cell phone on the first ring. You know what I'm
No,
saying?
and now there's ways that, you know, as a parent, you can
Track the location or
track
something.
the location.
Yeah.
Like here's an example for you. So I was a junior in high school, and the movie Batman and Robin came out. That classic.
That was a great one. 5 stars.
Yeah, since whatever his name, Joel Schumacher. Was it Joel Schumacher or whatever his name is, who basically ruined the Batman franchise after Tim Burton? But that's a whole different story within itself. But so I went with a couple of friends. We went to I don't remember the name of the movie theater, but there used to be a movie theater underneath on 44th Street, right under the Viacom building where MTV Studios is, which is now I think called like the Sony or Nokia Theater, where they do live concerts and that kind of stuff. But we went to like an 11, 12 o'clock showing, 4 or 5 guys. And when we got out, we went around the corner to Times Square, and it's like 1:32 in the morning, and you know there's like a fight between like a bunch of kids, and we're sitting there watching it. But in the meantime, there's like a couple of cops that are just literally standing there watching the exact same fight, which was insane. It was almost like watching a fight in a hockey match. You wait till one of the guys falls on the ice, and then you break it up.
Right.
It was epic, and it went a couple of blocks. And this was before, you know, it became Disney-fied in Disneyland when they brought
all the camera, all the stores in, and all the lights and stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the Virgin Megastore was still there. I mean, you still had a ton of prostitutes all throughout Times Square.
Yeah,
you didn't have all these like ghetto funny Elmos and like,
oh yeah, the guys doing the thing. Like it was like the. I watched a show that used to be like Times Square wasn't as nice as we think it was. Was that show on HBO? Yeah, where it was like, wow, Times Square was not super nice, but it got nice.
It was not. There was a lot of prostitution. There were a lot of like sex parlors, that kind of stuff. When I think it was when Disney purchased a theater on 42nd Street to bring The Lion King here. You know, the story that I've seen before on videos is that essentially like Rudy Giuliani turned to like whoever was the head of Disney at the time and was just like, the streets will be clean. And they were like, are you sure? And he's like, they will be. Like almost like so. And sure enough,
business. He was like, bringing the business in. We're gonna make this, clean this place up.
Exactly.
But because they wanted to make it touristy. And yeah.
Completely changed it, and now you know they've taken out certain drive lanes. I think it's Broadway is basically a pedestrian walkway. You can only drive up and down 7th or vice versa. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. They did that.
It's just like the vibe is completely different, you know.
So what about, and so you're saying the vibe is different. Manhattan is very touristy, commercial, but the vibe. How about just talk about the energy and the vibe of Queens? Has that remained consistent? Has that remained similar to your childhood? Has that remained neighborhoody, or has that changed significantly too?
It's still neighborhoody, but you've got now your neighborhoods that pop even more so than you did before. You know, where we live in Astoria, which in the episode that you had with Katie, and I also say it's similar to like Delray by you guys.
Yeah.
I mean, we've even said, not that we're doing this, but we're like, if there was a part of Virginia that we ever moved to, it'd probably be like a Delray, Shirlington kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because it has like arts, a fun scene, like young families, good restaurants, atmosphere.
Yeah, it's very similar. I mean, it does feel like Delray when I think about it, totally on the aesthetics and the little house, the houses and walking to places and the metros right there. It's very similar.
Oh, yeah. So you got that, and then you got like Long Island City, which Long Island City is like a whole different story within itself. And, you know, in 2008, when the world kind of collapsed because of, you know, predatory lending with mortgages and whatnot in the banks, there were a lot of, you know, glass monstrosities being built that kind of all hit the brakes rapidly. But, you know, once we came out of the 2008 recession, it's just been on fire. Like Long Island City in terms of Queens, which is legitimately right over the East River. So for those of you that do or don't know, Manhattan's obviously an island surrounded by water. You've got on the west side, you've got the Hudson. The east side, you've got the East River, and it all falls into New York Harbor, which lets out into the Atlantic Ocean. But in Long Island City, you're essentially right across from like Midtown Manhattan, from like 59th Street down to like the 20s, is where you are geographically. One stop to Grand Central, 2 stops, 3 stops, whatever it is, virtually almost to like Midtown. The it spot to be. A lot of corporate offices are there. Dan's companies, JetBlue has their office. A lot of film and television production. Silver Cup Studios, which a lot of HBO things filmed there. The Sopranos, Sex and the City, Astoria. We actually have Kaufman Art Studios, home of Sesame Street, as well as a couple of other things. Orange is the New Black also used to film there. They built a whole updated soundstage when they did Men in Black 3 there to do a lot of the green screen stuff, which was kind of cool. And now by us over here, Robert De Niro and his business partners spent like, 60, $70 million or something crazy like that.
Oh.
They bought a huge, about 5.5 acres of land, I believe it was, from the Steinway factory, Steinway pianos, which are still actually manufactured in Astoria, Queens to this date. But there was a huge chunk of land that wasn't getting used, and there's so much film and television production that happens here, and the rise of things like Hulu, Amazon Prime, Netflix, that all the facilities are so overrun. So they now created, or eventually, when the world, in theory, has reopened by now, start pushing through things. It'll still take, no matter what, 18 to 24 months construction wise, but it'll be a really nice boom and resurgence of Astoria. And I always knew Astoria, obviously, because I grew up in Forest Hills. Astoria is not too far away, and it used to have a couple of really nice drags of retail, which have just changed. But that's a product of whether it be the malls or just more of a critical mass, or the fact that like virtually every neighborhood now has its own everything. As opposed to being like, oh, I'm going to go to this street here because that's where I want to shop for this, or that street there because I'm going to shop for that.
Wow. So we're going to do like a real crazy pivot, but you went to college, and I want you to explain, but you went way far away from the land of New York. Can you tell the listeners where you went to college, and how did you come to that? And then maybe speak upon the differences of where you went to college and your home.
Sure. So I went to college in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which, funny story, when a lot of people were like, oh, where are you going to school? And I was like, I'm going to college in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And they'd be like, I don't know how to speak Spanish.
Yeah.
I'm like, New Mexico is like the 47th or 48th state in the union. Like, I'm not going to Mexico. I'm going to New Mexico.
Yeah.
Like, have you seen Rent? Have you seen Newsies? There's songs about Santa Fe. It's just way different, but yet similar. There's a lot of money in Santa Fe. It is a place where a lot of people have like their second, third, fourth home.
Oh, I know that. Oh, okay. So like LA people or people would move and just get their own spot out there in Santa Fe.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you had guys like Val Kilmer lived out there. Carol Burnett had a home out there. Alan Arkin, Tim Curry had friends out there, like 2 years in a row working at the J. Crew that I used to work at for holidays. Like Tim Curry would be in there like virtually like every other day with his friend shopping. And to the point that like my manager said to him, you show up one more day, we're going to put you on the schedule.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And there was actually, when I was in Santa Fe, there was a lot of film and television production, and this was like Breaking Bad, which I guess really put New Mexico on the map. But there was a Billy Bob Thornton movie called All the Pretty Horses that filmed right before I came to school, the Will Smith movie with Kevin Kline, Wild Wild West.
Oh, that was a classic.
Well, yeah, and they filmed on my campus. They filmed a lot of green screen stuff, other than the
Wow.
fact that they also built a lot of the unit on Tom Ford had a ranch somewhere south of Santa Fe, and they accidentally burnt that down.
How'd you pick that place of all places? How'd you like?
My mom.
You just threw a dart? Your mom threw a dart? Like,
We went, growing up, I always knew I wanted to be an actor. So I was looking at like the big schools for theater and for music theater, the NYU's, the Northwesterns, which I decided not to because nobody had gotten in over 12 years from my high school.
okay, so you had to, like, you went to your you combined it with a little bit of your admissions knowledge, and you're like, wow, no one from my high school got into the Northwestern. It's crazy.
So that I pulled out of, like I thought about like a Cincy Conservatory. Later on in life, I learned about Baldwin Wallace, Syracuse, and we went. There's a Hilton in Midtown on like 54th and 6th, and they had a performing arts college fair.
Okay, yeah.
And so like my mom and I kind of like split up for a hot sec, and she passed by a school called the College of Santa Fe, and she was like, "You should take a look at this." It's like one of those things where you always know that mother knows best, right? So she
got the pamphlet. Yeah, I got it. It's crazy.
He was kind of like, listen, you could be a small fish in a big pond, or you could be a big fish in a small pond. And we went to, I started doing the rounds and auditions, and went to Santa Fe.
Okay, yeah. So you went there at least first to see what it looked like, right?
Yeah, went there, wanted to see what it looked like. Stayed with a host, my buddy Casey O'Brien, who I call Tex because he's from Texas. And I ended up staying with him for 3 nights. I was only supposed to stay 1 night to kind of, because we hit it off and like other friends that later became like big brothers, big sisters when I started going there. I auditioned, had a great audition with, the department chair, who now rests in peace. And I walked out of the audition and I was just like, I got into school here and this is where I want to go. And, we walked out of the audition. I went straight to the head of admissions and I was like, hey, do you mind if I stay 1 more night with Casey? They were like, no problem. And as my mom and I were leaving, John Weckesser, the department chair, was walking in, gave me a big smile. And for him, he didn't really smile that much. So when you got something, like, it was kind of like gold. And 3 or 4 days later, after getting home from Santa Fe, I got my acceptance letter,
Nice.
which caused me to sing the song Santa Fe from Newsies as I walked up the hill.
Did you were you the only New Yorker when you went to college?
No, there were a couple of us, not a lot. I'm just trying to think. In my program, there were like 2 or 3 of us. And then I also, a buddy of mine who was an arts and science major, this kid James, who's from Brooklyn. We eventually were roommates. I think it was our junior year. We shared an apartment together. But our school was mainly filled with folks from like Texas, Colorado, and California.
And what about the pace was it crazy different, the pace, or did you like it? Did you like, at first you're like, okay, I like the school. I knew the acting scene was great, but like, man, you kept on comparing, like you were that city guy that kept on saying stuff like, this ain't like New York, this ain't like New York. Or eventually they were like, no, this is your, you know what I'm saying? Like, no offense, but everyone, when Bama say they from New York, they from New York. They be like, I'm from New York, everyone like, and that's just almost, everyone saying Virginia, they think we Southern, that we're slower. But
we, what was nice about Santa Fe, which was dubbed the land of manana, in terms of like the pace. Like, let's talk about a slow pace.
Yeah,
it was a slow pace. It taught me how to chill out. Though real estate hasn't really helped any of that.
yeah.
But I lost my New York accent. Just from kind of being around this like mix of like Texas, Colorado, New Mexico and California. And I just fell in love with it because it was mountains, it was high desert. So for those who don't really know Santa Fe, Santa Fe is like 9,600 feet above sea level, so it's higher up than Denver. It's not pure desert. We do get all four seasons, or got a ton of snow. It's known for its skiing during great snow seasons. And it's the kind of thing where you go northwest and you're kind of in like the Pecos Forest. You go like northeast and you're heading up towards like Lake Abiquiu, and you see like a lot of like red rocks, and that's where like Georgia O'Keeffe's Ghost Ranch is. Also Bandelier National Park. And this is going to kill me, and I totally can't remember right now. But we live not too far from one of the last remaining nuclear, like where they developed the nuclear bomb.
Yeah, where they drop bombs. Okay. But not like Area 51, but like the ones where they did testing for in the desert.
That was south. That was White Sands. This was Los Alamos, where the national lab is. There we go. I remember. Crazy. So that's where they actually developed and created. And then they took it south to what's known as White Sands. And that's where they tested them, and they blew them up.
Yeah, that's crazy. A lot of history.
White Sands is one of the most amazing places in the world. And I highly, highly recommend if you ever go to New Mexico, heading south and checking that out, and Roswell, where the whole Area 51 is or isn't, and alien culture and all that stuff.
So New Mexico is quite unique. If you would say you could not go back to New York and live there, would you be happy living in Santa Fe? Like as a raising a family and living there, is it like that place comparable to?
Yes, but no, but yes. I mean, I've said to Katie multiple times, and if our in-laws, if Joan and Jeff listen to this and hear, I apologize in advance. If Katie would say yes to Santa Fe, we'd move yesterday.
New Mexico's different. That's a different spot.
It's just a different way of life. There's a lot of art, a lot of culture. The education is not exactly the greatest in terms of public, but private, it's a lot better. But it's like one of the highest per capita in terms of like art sales in the country, behind like a San Francisco. One of the top ranking opera festivals in the world, in the Santa Fe Opera is there. Thriving theater scene, and then a ton of film, obviously I talked about before, and really, Breaking Bad, when they so you want to hear irony, I had an agent in Santa Fe. Mm-hmm. I did a little film and television and print work and commercials, and a year after I left to come back to New York, a little known production started shooting called Breaking Bad. Filmed, I think it was like 7 or 8 seasons, something like that.
Wow.
And really changed a lot of the way things were done in Mexico, and film and television.
So bringing it back, so now what was your transition like coming back to New York or Queens after living somewhere quite different for a while?
My pace was slow. Which I didn't necessarily mind. Pace was slower. I was more understanding. I was more kind. I listened. Also, like, more grounded. Santa Fe is a very, very spiritual spot with some really cool stuff and stories and culture behind it. So, like, I felt a little bit more enriched, if you will, coming back to New York City.
So, and then coming back, obviously you went to college for theater. Talk about how when you're coming back home, how do you still infuse theater into your life now that you're not, in college, you're doing it as your normal life. Like you just said earlier, you're in commercial real estate, but how do you still keep in touch with something that's been a passion of yours since you were a kid, performing in theater?
Sure. The big thing that propelled me to come back to New York was a lot of friends. So after I graduated, I stayed an extra 3 years, and like I said, I had an agent and did film and television, and I also did a lot of theater. Did a lot of theater. I'd actually call that my master's program, and I'd say I learned more doing on stage in the years post the College of Santa Fe than I ever learned in any academic classroom at the College of Santa Fe. And people were like, "Listen, you're pretty good. Why don't you go back to New York? You live there. You have a bedroom. You don't have overhead. You can stay with your parents and just audition." And finally, I was like, you know what? Why the heck not? And I came back to the city, wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, thinking I could do something. And the next thing I know, I was working consistently. I mean, I made a life out of being an actor for almost a decade, I'd say, working contracts, but I was going to like Clarksville, Tennessee.
Yeah, that's how I remember that live, with Katie.
It was different, and then national tours, which is how I met Katie. We're living in Alaska, so it was cool because at the same, I had that nice balance of, all right, I'm in New York 2-3 months. I'm starting to get tense. No offense, mom, or anybody who goes home and lives with their mom, but when you're living with your parents, it's had that taste of freedom from college. You want freedom again.
Yeah.
So like as like things would kind of be like, I'd get like a gig and I'd go to a small town for like a month to like 4 months or 5 months or something like that. And I'd come home for 2-3 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever, and then I'd go back on the road. So it became a really nice balance. Now fast forward, met Katie when we did the national tour of A Christmas Carol. It was my third year on tour and her first. We hung out a little bit in the city beforehand. We both had kind of sworn off actors, and obviously the rest is history because we didn't quite swear each other off.
No. Did people have you? I know you and Katie settled down and had families and all that stuff. Are there people that kind of live that lifestyle of going to New York and going out? They do that, but they do that significantly for the rest of their life. Have you met people like that, or most people kind of eventually settle down?
Look, it really depends, in terms of like the theater and that kind of stuff. It was said best by like Harrison Ford in an interview years ago when he was doing like Star Wars. He's like, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. When he got his break in his 30s playing Han Solo, he was kind of like the last man standing. One of my best friends, who also Will, I call him like the torchbearer for our class. Like he, I watched him suffer. I watched him go through a lot of crap. I watched and have had many conversations when he was ready to walk away from the business. He was tired. He wanted stability. He wanted a real back. He wanted eventually maybe to be able to like truly settle down or have a family, whatever. And, from that, he almost walked away. He got all the way with Bryan Cranston on Broadway. Then, that happened and it was great. And then it's sort of like, when's my next gig coming? When's the next thing? And he was doing a lot of off-Broadway and small bits here and there. And then all of a sudden he lands Good Place on NBC, which just wrapped or just had its final season past February. The season finale was. And it's like propelled him. So it's like amazing to see that. Other friends that Katie and I have had throughout the years, changes. Like you get your theater fix by doing community theater. It's tough. You have a wife, you have kids. You don't want to go away. I don't know if you know this, but a few years back, like right after Jack was born, I got a call to come in and audition for. They were launching another national tour in 2017 of.
You say national tour means like they were traveling. It's a traveling thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it would have been a year commitment.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been, had I gotten it. I didn't go to the audition period because Katie and I talked about it, and it just didn't necessarily sound ideal, though fantasizing about it sounded awesome. But she was right. It would have meant that if I got it, we would be packing up everything, subletting our apartment in New York, and on the road. And even though the part I was auditioning for, which was to be like the offstage standby for Scar and for Pumbaa in Lion King, it would have meant that I had to stay at the theater every night till like intermission. Once they started the second act, and you see that in theory everybody's fine.
It's like you're in the cut, you're waiting, and if something happens, you jump in. But if they don't need you, they'll let you go home.
Yeah, it's like.
But you still get paid, or they're like, we only pay you if you go on stage.
Oh no, you get paid. You get a production contract, which would have been amazing. It's like being the 12th man on a basketball team.
Gotcha. Yeah, like a sub. You're a sub in the back. Yeah, that's pretty.
You're the number one fan and the highest paid fan.
yeah.
Who gets to dress up in the gear sometimes, and if you're lucky, gets to walk and talk on the court and shoot and dribble.
Yeah, they go back to the bench. Yeah, that's pretty. I mean, that's sweet though. Sweet deal. But but the balance is there. Like you've seen on the full gamut, you've seen like your friend Will. He almost like didn't do it, but he did it. But you've seen the full gamut of people chasing the theater and creative world. But at the same time, similar to this podcast and whatever, is that if you still want to do it, you still incorporate it. Like you say, community theater, you still can incorporate arts in your life to still get that fulfillment.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's ways to do it. Playing music, having fun, dance parties with Jack. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I'm a member of Actors Equity, which Katie's also a member of. And I do 2 to 5 productions a year, which also helps me get my health insurance through my union, which is a great union in case somebody randomly who's an equity member might be listening to this. I've just been fortunate in that way.
Yeah. So when do you think that for you to still incorporate acting in your life, that the environment in New York is probably the prime place to still do it as a family man as compared to some other places in the United States?
Yes, but no. I mean, look, it depends what level you want to get to. The major leagues, no matter what, is always going to be Broadway. Broadway's evolved. It's changed. It was starting to change a long time ago, but ever more so over the last 20 years. You get a lot more film and television guys that are driving vehicles. Hugh Jackman is supposed to be opening a production of The Music Man. So you get that name, or when he and what's his name from James Bond,
Daniel Craig.
Yeah, him and Daniel Craig did a show a couple of years ago. Daniel Radcliffe does a lot of Broadway stuff. Those are big names that sell. One of my friends who I went to high school with, and he still works a lot, this kid, James Martinez, who I think you might have met at the wedding. He's a Juilliard grad, and what was funny is that he said that when he graduated, he wanted to get a film and television career just so he can have a theater career. Because once you're a name and you can sell a 1,500, 2,000 seat house, then people will throw the work at you.
True. So, and this is my last question before we do our shot for shot segment, but what's the difference between, not difference, but obviously New York is the epicenter of Broadway and that kind of musical theater part. But then there's also LA, which is, I guess, more the movies. Is there like a different type of acting in different locations in different regions of the country, particularly?
There are a lot of towns that have like a great theater scene. Where you have a great theater, Arena State, theater in Shirlington. You have like Metro Stage. You also Signature, in Shirlington. Dallas is a pretty solid theater scene. South Florida, like Miami, Broward County, there's a lot of theaters down there.
Okay.
Where else? Seattle has a very vibrant theater community, and
Okay.
Chicago has a
Okay.
great.
In Chicago too. Okay.
I mean, look, even Santa Fe, from when I left to my understanding to what's happening now, there were like 3 or 4 theaters back then, and I think now there's like 6 or 7, if not maybe some more in Santa Fe, and doing great works and reaching out to people. Look, it just depends. If you're cool, if you want your life to be theater, if you want to make money, if you want to have it pay your bills,
Mm-hmm.
up to a New York or an LA.
Gotcha.
If you want it to fulfill something in you that, is still an itch that you have for it, you can pretty much go anywhere.
Right.
And look, there have been people, what was it? I heard something earlier, like an Angela Lansbury, who was in a movie or something and nominated for an Academy Award at the age of 18. But then you didn't hear of her again until she did Murder, She Wrote. And then she became a household name, and that was when she was in her 60s. You hear those stories of folks later in life hitting it big, and you're like, oh, again, back to that sprint or marathon comment. So, yeah.
True. All right. Well, I think as our part of our episode called Shot for Shot, you get to ask me a random question. I get to ask you a random question. Probably not even related to this, but just whatever. So you want to go first? I'll go first.
You go first.
All right. So I don't know. I've only watched 2 episodes of the Jordan documentary, but I'm going to, definitely dive in deeper. But this is a side note. If they were to do, it was only supposed to be The Last Dance. If they were to do one on the Knicks, what season would you think they should use for the Knicks? And what would the title be for the Knicks if they did their own 10-part series for the Knicks?
It would either be the 93-94 season or be the 98-99. Can I curse?
Sure, whatever.
Or I won't curse then. It'd basically be called What the Bleep Happened.
I like that. There you go. We can fill in the blanks. I think that even if it was a public 10-part, you'll just put a little like asterisk. Okay. I love that. Now I'm very curious. Okay, so what season would it be, and why would it be called What the Bleep Happened? Like, are you going to talk about how it led up to what point in that I'm curious.
It'd be more than 93-94 season. Look, part of The Last Dance, which was cool, and eventually when you follow it, but in episodes 1 and 2, I think it set the groundwork for, the Bulls, or what was it? It was, the Pistons had to beat the Celtics to be in a championship. The Bulls had to get past the Pistons, and then basically the Knicks had to get past Chicago, and in theory, Indiana as well. A very big challenger and rival for us. And when Jordan decided to play baseball, it really opened up the door, and the Knicks stepped up very well. The problem, and I got a lot of respect for him, and actually even more so after I did a Zoom thing with him, which was John Starks, which was super cool.
Dang, John Starks is the man, yeah.
But like, he just shot too many shots in those last 2 games. And he was right. He said they should have never lost the game that sent them back to Houston, because that pretty much was it. But at the same time, we had matchup issues. Is that
the one with Akeem the Dream one?
Yes.
Hold up. Was that the one where OJ interrupted? No, that was a different one. I remember watching. Was that? No, that's the Magic. Was that Orlando? Which one was that? That was a Knicks game, wasn't it?
Yeah, OJ. Wasn't OJ the 94? No, wait, I was in high school.
I remember it was a Knicks game, playoff game, and they interrupted with the Bronco. I don't know what Knicks game that was.
It was a Knicks playoff game. I don't remember, but I was a sophomore in high school, so that would have been like 96. So that was like the Bulls getting back into like their second three-peat.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, talk about it. I remember seeing
So what season was it where Patrick Ewing missed the layup? Or
that was that season. That was 93, 94.
So that would be in the documentary.
Yeah. I mean, look, you look at the Knicks and what they've done and what they haven't done. That could be a whole other podcast episode within itself. But in the same series where you had the dunk, where John Starks dunked over Horace Grant, but when you saw the picture, Michael Jordan was in that picture. So no matter what, it doesn't matter. He dunked over Michael Jordan.
Yeah,
in the same series that you have the dunk, you also have the layup. And the layup wasn't a positive thing. It was Charles Smith legitimately missing 5 layups underneath the basket. And the dude was like 6'8", 6'9", on a 10-foot rim. Like, you just put up your arm and you can get it in. Dude missed 5 times. They lost the game. Chicago, the rest is history.
We should pitch that. That should be like another. Well, I think they already have like a 30 for 30 about the Knicks and the Pacers one. Remember that one? That was a pretty good one.
Oh yeah,
that was a good one. All right, your turn. Ask me a random question for shot.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, you asked me a really, really good one. Like now, I was going to ask you something stupid.
Yeah.
I don't think I can ask you something stupid. No,
yeah.
I guess. All right. You can go anywhere in the world for a vacation.
Okay, vacation.
For a vacation. Money's not an issue.
Okay, that's not
absolutely not an issue.
Uh-huh.
And you've got either your parents or Joan and Jeff to watch The Boys.
Yeah. Okay. So like a really free vacation.
Really free vacation.
Like and a fun one. I'm still gonna put on my list, and it's still on my bucket list, and it's still on my like money. Like it's expensive. I want to go to Japan. Straight up. I've always wanted to go to Japan, but the thing is, you already knocked out a couple of the factors that hold me back. One is my kids. That's the number one factor. Number 2, I heard Japan is really expensive, but you said that but everything I want to do is dope. Like I saw this documentary where there was the number 1 sushi restaurant was in a Subway. It's like a really small one. Did you see that one? It's on Netflix. I think it's gone now. But there was legit like the number 1 sushi restaurant. It's like super. It's not even fancy. No frills and thrills. It's in a Subway. That's in Tokyo. I love Japanese anime. I love Japanese culture. I mean, I can't speak a lick of Japanese, but I would love to go to like the quiet part too. You know, like the temples and I love just the tranquility of it. I mean, straight up, it's Japan for sure. I mean, and isn't it? I mean, I hope per this pandemic, isn't it the next Olympics going to be in Tokyo? But that's already out, you know. So
I think so.
But that literally legit. I've always since day one of saying I want to see the world. I always wanted to go to Japan.
Nice.
And then number 2 will be Australia.
Australia is amazing. I went in 2006.
I think that's it. And then Brazil. That's number 3.
I wouldn't go to Brazil anytime soon, though, with what's going on.
Well, they got Corona too, right?
Behind the United States, they're the number 2 country in the world.
Oh, that's good. Well, just wear 2 masks. But yeah, Japan. Japan is number 1 for me. All right, man. So we did a really good episode. We're going to do another one somewhat maybe. I don't know. We was going to talk about sneakers, but now I kind of want to just talk basketball. But we'll do that for another episode. Maybe we'll just talk sports.
Sneakers.
Huh? Basketball and shoes put together.
Exactly. That one really begot the other.
Yeah. You know? So, with that being said, the stage, the stage is set or set, not set. What am I trying to say? The floor is yours. There you go. The floor is yours. Please, for the listeners, shout outs, whoever you want to shout out to this episode, and then plugs. If there's any ventures, anything that you want the listeners to follow up with you, or, mind you that if this is in June, anything that they can just keep a lookout And everything that you shout out and plug, or not shout out, but everything that you plug, just let me know. I'll put it in the show notes so that whoever listens can click on the links and follow up. So shout outs and plugs.
Shout outs and plugs. My family, Katie and Jack, you guys, you, Maggie, the boys, my mom, my stepdad, my in-laws, Jeff and Joan. Shout out to all y'all. Shout out to New York City. Shout out to Santa Fe, New Mexico. Shout out to the Knicks. The best thing that could have ever happened. The best thing that could have ever happened was the fact that we did not have to sit back and suffer watching Knicks basketball this year after not getting Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, which is a whole other story. We'll save that for the next episode. And in terms of plugs, man, wash your hands. Wear your mask.
Wear your mask.
Be conscious of that kind of stuff. Everybody geographically hits it in a different way. You know what I'm saying? And it's a lot different if you're somewhere where it's like hard hit versus where it's not. And just respect the boundaries and know that, God forbid, like it hits your part of the world where you are. Just you're not going to want it to be as bad as it was here or other parts of the world. Respect your friends, your elders, your family, your friends' friends, your friends' families. So that, but then also in terms of other plugs, man, support live theater, support the arts. If anything, arts during this time has meant a lot, to a lot of people. You've had a lot of folks that have done readings on Zoom. They still did American Idol and The Voice and Survivor, ending with live performances all via Zoom and recording that way, which is kind of cool. Broadway League, all the shows and the concerts and, the Disney sing-alongs that they've done. It just shows that theater and entertainment is always going to be a part of our life. And that's one of the biggest industries that is hit extremely hard. We have a lot of friends that have done a lot of really cool things that are in a bad spot right now. Then, obviously also sports, and people should realize that sports and arts and entertainment are kind of like interwoven with each other. I would 100% say, you watch, which you brought up before, The Last Dance, and just the raw emotion that you get to see, brought back a lot of the feels within me. Earlier when we were talking about my time in Santa Fe, I got into a debate which actually lasted the entire class with, my former department chair, John Weckesser, who I mentioned, rest in peace. And, it was whether or not sports could be considered art. And he said no, because there was no human condition. And so for me, I said, are you going to tell me that watching like a Wayne Gretzky or like a Barry Sanders, go basically, Barry Sanders breaking all those tackles and scoring touchdowns, or an Emmitt Smith and the spins and the twirls and the leaps over, defenders, or like Gretzky going goal line to goal line, almost like ballet, or Jordan winning that NBA championship on Father's Day. I was like, you can't tell me you don't feel that raw emotion watching that.
Yes, there's theatrics to everything. Everything has stories and storylines, and I mean, like the WWF, they have like villains and all that, but like in real sports, there's the same thing of villainized people and characters, and the scene is set and the stage, and I mean, I don't know if I would argue. I'm like, all right, bro, you got it, but I definitely would agree that there is a lot of theatrics to real sports, and the same thing that you said with emotion and getting invested and involved is totally in sports, 100%. So, and also I know that people miss it for that same reason, missing someone, someone's dad passed away. Brett Favre's dad passed away. He scores 4 touchdowns, stuff like that. That's crazy, right? Like there's a whole lot of stories, and that's why 30 for 30s are so successful, right? That's why all these sports documentaries are successful, because I believe there is a story and storyline, but definitely support all those people. And I think I do agree. I think one of the things that you did bring up was, how do you support the arts in this time? You know, a lot of friends I know that are musicians are doing those things on Instagram Live and still performing and getting the audience. So, you know, still trying to express themselves creatively during this time is very important. I think it also, the arts brings a lot of people together, right? You know, like, it's good to have something to watch. And
yes, and you know, there's a sense of community.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there have been studies that show that when you're watching theater in person, that everybody's hearts in the room almost kind of like beat in the same rhythm. Because, you know, you're going through the same feels and emotions. It might be slightly different, but when that like powerful thing happens, whether it be sad or happy, that makes everybody cry or laugh or whatever, you're all feeling it simultaneously, and it's a genuine shared reaction amongst people, which it only happens when you're in a room together. And at this point, you know, back to my, you know, first thing I said in my plug, wash your hands and wear your masks so we can get back in these rooms together and entertain and be entertained.
Excellent. Well, this is a great episode. Obviously, we're going to do again. I really enjoyed it. I hope the listeners will listen and follow up. We'll do this, and, you know, thank you. And continue to support the podcast, Positive Philter listeners. If you have any questions, I do questions and Q&As, or if you want to drop a line on the hotline, it's 571-336-6560. That's 571-336-6560. You can leave a voicemail for the podcast or whatever. This has been great. Thank you, Nate, for joining us. And we're out.
Later.
Thank you for listening to Positive Philter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity of Movement. Thanks for listening.